It's not easy being a grammar Nazi, believe me. Somebody's got to do it. It's not an easy job. What'd you say? It ain't so bad. You do know that ain't is correct. It is the correct contraction for am not. Truly, don't tell that to your English teacher, but it is the correct contraction for am not. Well, I mean, what is the contraction for am not? Amn't? And so, technically, that is but you can't say we ain't, or they ain't, or any of those things, because that is not correct. What? Y'all ain't. No, because that's plural. It's only first person singular that can be a contraction like that. Y'all is correct also. It is the replacement for the thee and the thou, a singular you and a plural you, and it's the, y'all is a plural. Except when you talk to one person, you call them y'all. That's not correct. This falls under number one as we lead directly into our lesson, a barrier to good communication. There are some barriers to good communication, and then there are some suggestions for good communication. Like what? Fault finding? Yeah, like fault finding. Way down at the bottom. Fault finding, belittling, blaming. And this is our last lesson we're going to do on communication. Next week, Lord willing, we're going to look at finances. Bad time of year. Important time of year. One of the first barriers to communication, good communication, is fear. If you are afraid to open your mouth, you're not likely to say anything. If you're afraid of what's going to happen when you speak, then that's going to be a barrier to communication. Another barrier is materialism. Remember what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6 about riches? And it's true about materialism. And what does Jesus say there in Matthew 6? You cannot serve God and riches. Don't worry about all of the little things that we worry about. God will take care of us. Each day has enough worry of its own. But materialism is a barrier to good communication. Another one that we don't want to hear is the fast pace of the American way of life is not good for materialism. What's that?
It's not good for communication.
Yeah.
It's pretty good for materialism.
Oh, that's materialism, see? I'm glad you're paying attention. It is not good for communication, the fast pace of American life, because, loving takes time. Did you know that? If it's not worth a little bit of effort, then why bother? And a lot of times the fast pace of American life gets in the way because we just don't spend the time with each other. And maybe in your groups you can discuss some examples of that, but I'm sure you can think of examples where we're just too busy, and it's not a good thing. Along with that fast pace of American life is television. And there are a couple of reasons why television can be a barrier to communication. One is it's an abnormal obsession. It's too much time with the passive pastime. And the more time we spend with the passive pastime, just the act of watching television can be damaging to communication. And the flip side of that is the television itself often involves an obsession with the abnormal. So it's an abnormal obsession and an obsession with the abnormal. And just stop and think about television programs and see if what they're showing is normal or if it's abnormal. And if you keep on focusing on the abnormal over and over and over again, that's not good, and it's not good for communication. Look in Psalm 101. And then tape this to your television remote. The first part of Psalm 101, verse 3 says, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. What's the organization that keeps track of television watching? That poll? It's Nielsen poll. They send you a little piece of paper, you know, and you write down. Make your own little poll there and just keep track of how much time you spend not setting something worthless in front of your eyes. The positive side of that is in Philippians chapter 4, in verse 8. In contrast to setting something worthless before our eyes, what's the alternative? Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute. If there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. And add that to your little survey as you watch the television program to see which of these you can tick off as you're watching that program. This one didn't exist when Burkina and Faulkner did their marriage seminar, and it's electronic media. And one of the things that I got off the internet said, says, turn off your phone, or turn off your tablet, or whatever. When you're talking to somebody and they're doing something on the phone or on a tablet, or what does that tell you?
They're not listening.
They're not focused on whatever that is.
But they're not interested in
And it indicates a lack of interest. And we'll talk more about this later on when we get into family and child rearing, the impact of electronic media and the many dangers in electronic media. But I mention right now that we said before that because women are spaghetti and men are waffles, it's easier for women to multitask. The downside of that is it's not a good thing. Women are able to do several things at the same time, but more and more studies are showing that multitasking is not possible. That you've heard my definition, multitasking is the way to do several things at the same time poorly. And the data, the research backs that up, because when you're switching from one thing to another, you have a lag time. And you'd be better off doing one thing and taking care of it and doing something else and taking care of it than trying to juggle two or three. And if you're trying to text and do something else and have a conversation with somebody, and that kind of multitasking, it is not an efficient way to communicate. And so we'll... What's that?
So you can get a lot done when the circle's spinning on
Yeah, while the circle's spinning on the computer, then you can get something else done. And during the meantime, your brain is circling in the same circle. And sometimes it gets dangerous when we're driving and multitasking, like trying to text and do something else while you're driving, which has many reasons why there's a problem. But one is that the multitasking part of it, it takes you a second to switch from a task to another, which seems like not much. But if you're going at highway speed, 1 second is a long ways. And so there are lots of reasons why texting is bad while you're driving. It's a distraction. But just the multitasking part of it is bad. And so it can be very detrimental to communication. So fear, materialism, the fast pace of American life. Another barrier is revealing confidences. Proverbs chapter 17. Verse 9. Proverbs 17:9 says, "He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates intimate friends." Over in Proverbs 25, and verse 9 says, "Argue your case with your neighbor, and do not reveal the secret of another." You're welcome to share your problems if you want to, but don't share your spouse's. If they want to share it, they will, but it's not your place. If you do this, it closes the other person's mouth in fear that you're going to repeat something. And if you're in the habit of sharing somebody else's secrets with other people, then they're not going to share many secrets with you because they know what's going to happen. You've established And so the rule is keep a confidence even when not asked. Well, you didn't tell me not to say anything. And there have been times when someone will have a conversation with Amy assuming that I've told her something that somebody has told me. And our rule is that unless someone asks me to share something, I don't do it. I don't say, well, they didn't tell me not to tell somebody. And so if we will develop that habit in our marriage of not sharing something unless someone asks to do it, don't assume that it's okay.
Some couples do tell each other everything.
What's that?
Some couples do tell each other everything.
Well, it's okay if we tell each other, but not those types of things. What somebody shared with me. If what's happening in my life, I might share. But what's happening in your life, I'm not going to share with her, or she's not going to share with me.
Because I've heard of couples telling each other everything.
Yeah. And we do tell each other everything that's happening in our lives. Yeah, in my lives, but not what's happening in yours. It's just not good for communication, because then you wouldn't feel comfortable sharing something with her, knowing that she's going to share it with me or me. And so it's going to stifle conversation and communication if you're not sure how it's going to be shared. And it's a better rule. If someone doesn't say to share it, then don't share it. Bitterness and anger will stifle communication. Yes.
Can I make an advertisement on that point you just made?
Sure.
That also goes with us as elders. If you want the other elders to know, when you tell us something, you need to tell us. Otherwise, we don't tell the other elders either. And sometimes we kind of get in trouble because you expect us to know it when you told one, but you didn't let them know they could tell us, so we don't know.
Yeah, that's a good advertisement. That as elders, we keep confidences too. And if you want us to share something with the other elders, you need to tell us that, because we're not in the habit of just sharing things. And when we do share things in an elders meeting, we don't share that with anybody else. And so don't expect us to share that with anybody else, because it's not going to happen. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Johnny. Colossians chapter 3. And verse 19 says, "Husbands, love your wives and do not be embittered against them." In Ephesians chapter 4. And 26 is that verse that says, "Be angry and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger." Another barrier to communication is fault finding, belittling, blaming, which by its definition is destructive. It ruins human relationships. And it's most destructive to the fault finder, someone who's always looking for a fault. It's not going to change the behavior of the other person. If the husband is always looking to blame his wife for something, thinking he's going to change her, or she blames her husband, thinking she's going to change him, it's not going to happen.
All it does is it destroys
It makes
the
things.
person.
It does, and it just makes it worse. Okay, relationships, destructive the fault finder. It is an ineffective way to change the behavior of the other person. It teaches intolerance. To always be looking for what's wrong with somebody else. And this will come back to when we're talking about children, but it has its worst effect on the self-concept of a child. If the parents or others are constantly finding fault or belittling or blaming a child, it is especially harmful to children.
I saw a message that said, if you belittle and blame your child and just about this, find fault with them always, they will not ever hate you. They will hate themselves.
They will never think.
They will never hate you. They will hate themselves.
Yeah, and that's a good way of looking at it. If you belittle your child, they won't hate you; they'll hate themselves. which is a very unhealthy place to be.
Well, children will internalize all the negative.
Yeah, they're going to do that anyway. They're going to internalize, and if you just reinforce it by focusing blame on them. Romans 12:17 says, "Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men." Often we blame somebody for something because we think some way that's going to raise us up by bringing them down, by making some kind of a comparison there, and it doesn't do that. But, explosion, like shouting, will not help communication at all. Here's a good one. I just want to keep the record straight. Does anybody know where they keep the record? Where are we going to put it? If we're so quick to keep the record straight in communicating with our spouse, I just wonder where that record is stored.
Can we go back to that fault finding, belittling, and blaming?
Uh-huh.
One of the things I learned when I was teaching was that even when a child has tried to do something and someone goes, oh, in disgust because they didn't do it right, all learning stops.
Yeah. Yeah, that if a child is trying to do something and they're struggling with it and someone even just sighs, or maybe even by body language.
What that sigh is saying is, what an idiot.
Yeah, and so all learning stops then because of the negative impact on that child. We cannot overemphasize that fact, that the impact that we can have on our children just by how we say and what we say and what we do. Teasing, sarcasm, Proverbs 26:19. '18 says, "Like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, 'Was I not joking? I was just kidding.'" And so
I always think of the prophet. I don't even remember who it was that went into the town and he was bald and the kids started teasing him and a bear came and ate him.
yeah, Elijah. Wasn't it Elijah? Elisha. Well, they got theirs from the bear, the she-bear.
Well, they were only teasing.
They were only teasing. Silence. As we said last time, or one of the times, there may be times when silence is necessary, but you need to express that I need some time to process what I've just heard, what you've just told me, to let them know that you're not being silent because you're ignoring them, but that it's a positive silence to process what you're nagging, whining, quarreling. This was Jason's favorite passage there from the Proverbs about a nagging wife being like a dripping water or something like that. Mind reading. I know you. You just want to. No, you don't. So don't assume that you're able to read the mind of your spouse. If you need to know something, ask them. You are just like your mother. Comparing to other people's, not even bad traits, just comparing to any trait is not recommended. Unrealistic expectations. Some people think that alcohol makes them better conversationalists, makes them smarter, makes them better drivers. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. It doesn't make you a better conversationalist. It doesn't make you a better driver. It doesn't make you a more fun person to be around. This doesn't. And if you really want to kill conversation, just lie. And lying will destroy conversation. On the other hand, there are some practical steps to good communication. I need to be willing to accept criticism, to be able to receive criticism. And we should be willing to admit our faults immediately, quickly. And then ask for forgiveness and wait for the answer. In James chapter 5 and verse 16, therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. Learn when to use humor and when to be serious. Be specific and complete when you're expressing something. Try to see things through your spouse's eyes. Philippians 2 talks about having the same concept that Jesus had, that he put others first. And that's what made him willing to leave heaven. And so we can't put the other person first if we don't see things through their eyes. We need to see things through each other's eyes. And then we need to speak in the plural, except when we're expressing feelings. Remember when we're at a feeling level, it's I, because I cannot tell you how you feel about something. And so if we're having a conversation at the feeling level, it's I. But other times it needs to be we and us, we-ness in our relationship. Learn that your spouse's interest and acquire their tastes. Still time is always good. Recognize moods for what they are. They're moods. Still time is constructive. Individually, we need time on our own. And here's my favorite one of all. Go out on a date every week. Set a time or a night or whatever, and just go out on a date.
We're supposed to go together.
Yeah, I would recommend that you go with your spouse. Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Jason. Now, go out on a date with your spouse every week. If just remember what it was that made you fall in love in the first place. All that time you spent together going out on a date or whatever. But yeah, let's follow Jason's addendum and add your spouse on that. Accentuate the positives. Although we don't mention it every time, this is the number one step in everything we do, and that's prayer. Any step, anytime, anywhere that we're doing, the prayer is the first. Not just thrown in there as, oh, by the way, but really is the most critical element in whatever we're doing is pray. And sometimes written dialogue is good. It gives a person an opportunity to express what they're thinking, what they're feeling.
Like a text?
What's that?
Like a text message?
Like a text message? Yeah, maybe handwritten.
Like a poem?
Like a poem would be awesome. Yeah. Roses are red, violets are blue. You finish, you fill in the blanks. But written dialogue can be very beneficial to remember we said that we don't usually listen, we're usually formulating our response. And so people don't get a chance to complete what they're telling us. If you write it down, you can. And you get the opportunity to say it all before they start formulating their response, hopefully. What's that? Or before you forget it. Yeah. That's the other reason to write it down, is so you won't forget it. That's for the older people.
Well, also, writing it down helps you formulate.
Yeah. A lot of times it'll help you go back over whatever it is you're writing down. And that's beneficial too. Okay. We'll break up in our groups and discuss these. And as I said, next week, Lord willing, we'll talk some about finances, which is also an important thing in marriage.